I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I just set my fork down, folded my napkin, and walked out of my own daughter's wedding reception. That was 14 months ago. My wife called me 31 times that night. I let every single one go to voicemail. I need to back up a little because if I start at that dinner, you'll think I'm the kind of man who overreacts. I'm not. I spent 37 years being the kind of man who underreacts, who smooths things over, who tells himself that patience is a virtue and that a quiet house is a peaceful house. I'm 64 years old. I retired 2 years ago after 3 decades as a civil engineer for the county. Not glamorous work, not CEO money. I made a decent living, enough to pay off the house in Dayton, put 2 kids through college without loans, and take my wife somewhere warm every February. We weren't rich, we were steady, and for most of my adult life, I thought steady was enough. My wife, I'll call her my wife because that's what she still was at the time, was a dental hygienist. We met when I was 26 and she was 24 at a church social that neither of us particularly wanted to attend. We were married 11 months later. We had our daughter, then our son, 3 years after that. We built the kind of life that looks fine from the outside because it mostly was fine. Not perfect, but fine. I want to be honest here, because this isn't a story about a villain. Or maybe it is. I'm still not entirely sure. What I know is this. Things started shifting about 4 years before that wedding. Our son had moved to Portland. Our daughter was living with her then-fiancé in Columbus, about 90 minutes from us. The house got quiet in the way that big houses get quiet when the people who filled them are gone. I thought we'd adjust. Most couples do. My wife started going to a fitness class on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Then she added Saturday mornings. I didn't think much of it. She'd always been more social than me. I'm the kind of man who's happy with a book and a decent cup of coffee. She needed people around her. That was just who she was. Then she started coming home from those classes energized in a way that felt different, not just physically. Something in her had loosened up. She laughed more easily. She bought new clothes. Not dramatic, nothing I could point at and say that's strange, just incrementally different. Younger, maybe, I noticed, but I told myself I was imagining things, the way men my age do when they've spent too many years not paying close enough attention and suddenly they start paying too much. The first concrete thing I can point to was a Saturday in March, about 2.5 years ago. She said she was going to the class, then lunch with a girlfriend name. She gave me a name I won't repeat here, a woman I'd met twice at neighborhood things. She didn't come home until almost 6. I asked how lunch was. She said fine, they'd lost track of time. I said, okay. I don't know why I said okay. Maybe because I didn't have anything else to say. Maybe because I'd spent 35 years saying okay and I didn't know how to say anything different. It was our phone bill that finally said something I couldn't ignore. I've always handled the finances, not because she couldn't, she's a smart woman, but because I'm the one who enjoys spreadsheets. Always have. Every month I download the statements, categorize the expenses, check the balances. It's a habit I picked up from my father, who grew up during a time when you kept your own records because nobody else would. About 20 months ago, I was going through the wireless bill, and I saw a number I didn't recognize. It appeared 17 times in a single month, mostly evenings, a few times early morning. I didn't say anything to her. Not yet. I wrote the number down. I sat with it for 2 weeks. I told myself there was probably an explanation. A coworker. A patient's family member she'd been helping navigate some insurance thing. My wife was the kind of person who got involved in other people's problems. She volunteered at the church rummage sale every year. She was on the neighborhood watch email chain. It could have been anything. But I kept coming back to the frequency. 17 times, and the fact that I'd never heard her mention this person. Not once. After 2 weeks, I called the number from a gas station payphone. Yes, there are still a few of those, and a man answered. Just said hello. I hung up. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for about 20 minutes. Then I drove home, made dinner, and didn't say a word. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a man who makes fast decisions. Some people would say that's a weakness, and maybe they're right. But I also wasn't willing to blow up my marriage over a phone number and a feeling, not at 62 years old, not without knowing what I actually knew. So I did something I'm not proud of in a logistical sense. Even though I don't regret it, I hired a private investigator. Not some dramatic thing you'd see on television. She was a retired sheriff's deputy who now ran a small agency out of an office above a dry cleaner in Kettering. Her name was something sturdy and no nonsense. She charged me $800 a week and told me she'd probably have something useful within a month. It took her 3 weeks. She gave me a manila envelope on a Thursday afternoon. I opened it in my truck, same gas station parking lot. I don't know why that lot. Maybe because it was the place I'd already started becoming a different person. Inside was a series of photographs. Clear, professional, undramatic. My wife and a man. He looked to be about 50. He was trim in the way that men who care about appearing young are trim. He had the kind of easy smile that I recognized immediately as the smile of a man who does not worry very much. They were photographed at a restaurant I'd driven past 100 times and never been to. Then leaving together. Then in a parking garage. That was enough. I paid the investigator and thanked her. She shook my hand and said she was sorry. She meant it, I think. I drove home. Made dinner again, poured myself a glass of bourbon. I'm not much of a drinker, but I keep a bottle for occasions, and sat on the back porch until it got dark. My wife came home around 7, said she'd stopped at the grocery on the way back from work. Did I want pasta or chicken? I said chicken was fine. We ate dinner at the same table we'd eaten at for 16 years. She talked about a patient who'd been rude to her assistant. I listened. I said that sounded frustrating. She did not know that I knew. I decided that night that I was going to let that gap stay open for a while. Here is what I've learned about myself in these past 2 years. I am a man who needs to understand a thing completely before I act on it. That's not avoidance. It's just how I'm built. My father was the same way. He'd sit with a problem until he could see all 4 sides of it. Then he'd move, so I sat with it. I documented everything. Dates, times, what she said she was doing, discrepancies I could verify. I kept a small notebook in my truck. Nothing elaborate. Just a record. I called my doctor and made an appointment because I'm 64 and I wasn't going to ignore what stress does to a body at my age. He told me to watch my blood pressure and consider talking to someone. I started walking 6 miles a day instead. I called an attorney, not to file anything, not yet, just to understand what I was looking at. She explained things plainly and without drama, which I appreciated. I made notes. I went home. And then I waited for our daughter's wedding. I know how that sounds. Like I was planning something theatrical. I wasn't. I genuinely thought, hoped, maybe, that I was wrong about the whole thing. That the photographs meant something I hadn't understood. That my wife, when it came to something as significant as our daughter's wedding, would show up as the woman I'd spent 37 years believing she was. The wedding was in September. Our daughter married a good man. I want to say that clearly, because this story isn't about them, and I don't want any shadow of it to fall on their day. He's steady and kind, and he looks at her like she's the most interesting person in every room. That's all a father can ask for. The ceremony was at a small vineyard property about 40 minutes east of Columbus. Beautiful day. I wore the suit I'd bought for my son's college graduation and had dry cleaned twice since. My wife looked lovely. We took photographs with the kids and I smiled in all of them, and I meant it because whatever else was true, that part was real. The reception was in a converted barn on the same property. Long wooden tables, string lights, a band that played the kind of soft country music that nobody hates. It was exactly what our daughter had wanted, and I was proud of her for knowing what she wanted. We were seated at the main family table. My wife, me, her parents, my son, and 2 of my daughter's college friends who'd been in the wedding party. And then someone I didn't recognize sat down at that table. My wife leaned over and said, very quietly, that she'd invited a friend. She said it like she was telling me the appetizers had changed. Matter of fact, light. I looked at the man. He had a trim build and an easy smile. I recognized him from a parking garage photograph. I sat very still for a moment. Not frozen. Still. The way water goes still right before it starts to move somewhere. My wife was already introducing him to her mother, laughing at something, her hand on the table between them. I picked up my glass of water and drank it. I set the glass down. I placed my napkin on the seat of my chair, not thrown, folded, and I stood up. My son looked at me. I gave him a look that I hoped communicated everything it needed to, and I walked toward the barn doors. Nobody followed me out. I walked to my truck. I sat there for a few minutes. Then I drove back to the Vineyard small parking area, pulled up the number for a motel in Columbus, and booked a room. I texted my daughter, just her, and said that I was so sorry. Something had come up. I would call her tomorrow and explain everything, and that I loved her and her husband, and I was so proud of her. I did not ruin her night. I have held on to that. Then I turned my phone face down and drove. She called 31 times. I know because I looked at the screen each time and set it back down. Not to punish her. I just had nothing to say yet. Everything I might have said would have come out wrong, jagged or desperate, or something I couldn't take back. And I've never been that kind of man. The next morning I called my daughter first. She was upset and confused, and I told her only what she needed to know at that moment. That her mother and I were having serious problems that had nothing to do with her. That I was fine, that I was going to handle it the right way. She cried a little. I let her. Then I told her again that I was proud of her, and I meant it so much it hurt. I called an attorney the following Monday. What happened over the next 8 months is the kind of thing that strips a life down to its studs. You find out what the walls were actually made of. My wife, when she finally understood that I wasn't going to rage or plead or perform, seemed genuinely at a loss. I think she had expected one of those things. Maybe all of them. Instead, I was methodical. I moved my belongings out of the bedroom. I kept cooking dinner. I'm the better cook, always have been, because we still lived in the same house, and I'm not going to be petty about meals. I slept in the spare room that used to be my son's. I left for my morning walk at 6 a.m. every day. She tried to talk to me several times, not to apologize exactly, more to explain. I listened. I didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. She told me she hadn't meant for it to happen the way it did. I nodded. She told me she'd been lonely. I said I understood that. She told me she'd been lonely. I said I understood that. She told me she still cared about me. I said I knew that, and I believed her. Caring about someone and honoring your commitment to them are different muscles, and she'd let one of them atrophy. I didn't say that out loud. I've thought it many times since. The divorce was finalized in June. We split the house equity down the middle, which was fair. I kept my pension, and she kept her retirement account, which were roughly comparable. It was remarkably undramatic given everything. My attorney told me I was one of the easier clients she'd had. I didn't know how to take that. I am writing this from the back porch of a smaller house I'm renting in Beaver Creek. 2 bedrooms, a yard that's manageable for one person. There's a coffee shop 6 blocks away where I go most mornings, and nobody bothers me. I've started woodworking again. I used to do it in my 30s, and then life got busy and I put the tools away. I got them back out last August. I'm making a rocking chair right now. It's slow going, and that's fine. My son visited last month. He sat on this porch with me, and we talked for 3 hours about things we'd never talked about before. I don't know why it took all this to open that up between us, but I'm glad it did. My daughter calls every Sunday. She's doing well. She's happy. Her husband is good to her. That's the thing I come back to. When the nights get too quiet, I did something right somewhere. My ex-wife is still with the man from the photographs as far as I know. I genuinely hope she finds what she was looking for. I mean that without irony. What she did was wrong, and I'll carry the mark of it for whatever years I have left. But I don't have the energy at 64 to spend those years in bitterness. It's a terrible return on investment. People ask me, my son, a few old friends who knew us as a couple, whether I'm angry. Yes, I was. Some days I still am, in the way you can be angry at weather or at the particular configuration of events that led to a thing you couldn't control. But mostly what I feel now is something I don't have a perfect word for. Not peace, exactly. Not happiness. Something more like clarity. I spent 37 years being the man who said okay, who kept the peace, who trusted that steadiness was enough and that love, properly maintained, would hold. I know more now. I know that steadiness has to be chosen, both people choosing it, every year. I know that silence in a house isn't the same as contentment. I know that you can love someone completely and still not know them. I walked out of that barn with nothing in my hands. No plan, no speech prepared, no dramatic exit line. Just my dignity, which I'd almost forgotten I had. It turns out that's worth more than I knew. The rocking chair is going to take another few months. I'm not in a hurry. For the first time in a long time, I'm not in a hurry about anything. That feels like enough. I've thought a lot about what it means to finally see something clearly after decades of looking the other way. Not because you were blind, but because you chose, over and over, to believe that the life you were building was solid, that the effort you put in was being matched, somewhere on the other side of the table, even when the evidence started suggesting otherwise. What happened to me didn't happen overnight. That's the part nobody talks about. The betrayal wasn't just the man sitting at my daughter's wedding table. The betrayal was 2 years of Tuesday evenings, of phone bills I almost didn't read, of a wife who came home lighter in a way that had nothing to do with me. I was the last to know. And maybe some part of me had been choosing not to know for longer than I'd like to admit. Here's what I've come to understand. Actions accumulate. Every choice a person makes, to be honest or not, to honor something or let it quietly erode, those choices stack up. They compound. The woman who started skipping small truths eventually stood in a barn full of people who loved her and thought it was reasonable to bring him there. That didn't come from nowhere. It was the end of a long road she'd been walking for years, one small decision at a time, and my choices accumulated too. Every time I said okay when I meant to say something else. Every evening I let pass uncomfortable silence when maybe I should have asked a harder question. I'm not taking responsibility for what she did. That belongs to her, fully, but I've had to be honest with myself about the ways I made peace with things I shouldn't have made peace with. That's not guilt. That's just accounting. What I'm proud of, and it took me a while to feel proud of anything, is what I did with the information once I had it. I didn't perform. I didn't blow up. I didn't make my daughter's wedding a story about me and my pain. I folded my napkin and I left, and then I handled the rest of it the right way, slowly, with documentation and attorneys and morning walks and a small notebook in my truck. There's a kind of intelligence that only gets built through hard experience. I don't mean book intelligence. I mean the ability to sit with something devastating and not let it make you into someone you don't recognize. To be methodical when every instinct is telling you to react. That took everything I had. But it was the right thing, and I knew it was the right thing, and that knowing steadied me when not much else could. And the resilience. That word gets overused, but what I mean is simpler than the word. I got up every morning. I made coffee. I walked 6 miles. I built a rocking chair. Not because I felt fine, but because a man who stops moving at 64 tends not to start again. You keep the body going, and eventually the rest of you catches up. That's not wisdom I read somewhere. That's just what I found to be true. My son sat on my back porch last month and we talked in a way we never had before. My daughter calls every Sunday. Those things are real. They don't cancel out what happened, but they exist alongside it, and that's where I live now. In the alongside it, I don't know what the man with the easy smile is offering her that I wasn't. I've stopped trying to figure that out. What I know is what I offered. 37 years of steadiness, a paid-off house, 2 kids who turned out decent, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't announce itself because it assumes it doesn't need to. That was worth something. It still is.